5 simple bite-sized ways to create your teacher plan. Hey there, I'm Charlotte with Colorful Teaching for You. Thank you so much for joining me, and today we're going to look at how we can create our teacher plan. And this is not lesson planning. This is your teaching overview plan. And if you're in the midst of creating your year-long plan right now, this is going to be so helpful right now. So let's get right into it. We're looking at creating these plans because it helps with creating clear goals for our students without having to go overboard, right? It also allows us, when we're writing report cards, to know exactly what content, what competencies and all that we're working on, so that we already have the words for it. Or when we're away and we need a substitute teacher to cover, we already have a plan ready in place, okay? It also allows us to have really clear objectives for not just ourselves, but if we choose to share with our kids, then it becomes their objectives as well. So let's get into how to create this. These are bite-sized chunks, so don't feel overwhelmed. Make it as simple as possible. So here's what I'm going to get you to do. If I look down, it's because I've created my notes about how I like to approach it. So the first thing I like to do is I like to divide my page into 3 columns: term 1, term 2, and term 3. So this part is, I should have actually told you what I call this portion. It's called the focus on the long term. So again, divide into 3, your page, term 1, term 2, term 3. Under each term, I want you to look at your core competencies or whatever competencies you have that you have to teach. I want you to put them under each column. What are you going to teach term 1, term 2, and term 3? So we're not looking at the content, just looking at the competencies, because there's going to be too much otherwise for you to cover. This is going to help you already have that overview for when you need to give your principal. Okay, that's the first part. The second part is narrow it down. So what we're looking at here is focusing now on the content. So forget about term 2 and 3. That's over and done with. We're going to now focus on just term 1 today. And we're going to look at all the content pieces that we have to teach our kids. So the language should come directly out of whatever you're supposed to be using for marking purposes, right? So whatever the government needs you to use. So what exactly do you have to teach? Is it, say, forces, or is it Newton's law of attraction? So whatever it is that you need to teach, write that specific content piece down on your page, okay, underneath term 1. All you need to do is content 1, content 2, content 3, and leave some gaps in between, okay? The next thing you're going to do is get active. That's number 3. So get active here means I want you to focus on activities that you're going to be covering for the content piece, each content piece under term 1. So let's look at the activities. Now, activities can be full class teaching. It can be group, small group interventions. It could be homework that you decide to assign, and it may be something that your kids need to do because you want extra practice. It could be field trips, because field trips are part of the activities that help reinforce our learning. So any of those things goes under activities. You don't need to have dates for any of it, just broad topic ideas. That's it, okay? So once you've got your activities, that's number 3. Number 4 is to assess the work. We do need to look at assessment, okay? And that's also important for your substitute teacher or your principal who's going to be looking at your overview. Now, under each content and under each activity, or not under each activity, but underneath the content itself, what are you going to assess, formative versus summative assessment? And what I want you to focus on here is simplifying it, because so many of us, especially if you're a new teacher, tend to mark for everything, and that's just crazy. You don't have the time. I started that way, and I tell you, I started to burn out within my first year. I had to take a step back. So, for example, if you're teaching social studies, do you really need to mark for grammar at this moment? Probably not. The only time you would need to do that is if you're integrating both subjects together, then yes, that makes sense, but it's because you're not marking 2 separate pieces of work. You're marking one as 2 different topics or subjects. Does that make sense? If you're doing a full social studies unit and an entirely different language arts unit, you shouldn't be combining them both. It just is too much for you. Focus on one thing at a time, and one specific aspect. If you're doing social studies, one specific aspect. of, like, if you're covering, say, George Washington, you're studying about him today, then just about the facts maybe that day, or just about critical thinking that day. Don't go into every little details too much. So with a bullet points, what's one thing you're going to be assessing for? That's it, okay? Now, number 5 is create your timeline. So here we're going to be looking at one unit or one specific section, and I want you to create a timeline of when you're going to teach different activities. So perhaps today I'm going to be teaching a small group unit or a whole class unit about, I don't know, the concept of motion because of forces we talked about before. So just motion. Tomorrow I might be talking about just position. So what exactly are you going to cover on different days? So just one word for each of them, because it helps with breaking down that content. So when you're going to actually teach, you don't have to sit there and worry about it. Now you've got the activities for each subject. Does that make sense? So it seems overwhelming. Notice how we did not worry about term 2 and 3. We only looked at term 1. We only looked at, after we've narrowed it down, to just one unit, and that's all I'm asking you to come up with the activities for. So if this becomes too overwhelming for you, here are 2 different options for you. One, I've got a free resource for you, and that's going to be linked at the very bottom of if you look at the full episode link, that article there at the very bottom under free resources, it's a free masterclass about how to break down all of this. And it actually gives you, I give you templates and everything for you to be able to use. You can join us there. You could also join us in the Colorful Teaching Club, where we're going to be focusing on creating master plans for us to be able to teach, and also teach in a way that we're not rushing to constantly do the next thing, but we have time for ourselves as well. Okay? So we're looking at our plans in both. Sorry about that. I get excited and my voice just cracked a little bit. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. In the meantime, I'm going to recap really quickly what we looked at today. We talked about the importance of creating a teacher plan, not lesson plans, because that's too much, especially once you're past your first year. We've also looked at 5 different bite-sized pieces of how to do this. Number 1 is focus on the long term. Number 2 is narrow it down. Number 3 is get active. Number 4 is assess the work. And number 5 is create your timeline. If you want, if this is too much when we're talking, you can slow it down by pressing pause for the video, or you could go on to into the full episode again. I've actually got it all written down for you so that you're not having to stress out about constantly pressing pause. Okay? So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. In the meantime, remember to create, experience, and teach from the heart. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care. Bye.